get other people around you that are different than you that complement you. Right? Like if you can't be the person that is, they're all in the Excel sheet and they're good at the finances thing, then you better find someone else that is to help you with that, because you're not going to be that, right?
Yeah, always surrounding yourself with your, what I say, I call my weaknesses. I've never, at one point I had 100 people underneath me in my company, and I never, ever sought out people that were like me.
Welcome back to the Rediscover Podcast. Today I'm here with Kim Briggs. Hi, Kim.
Hello.
Hi.
Good morning.
So thankful that you came in today, because last time you were here, we were hanging out and we were just talking, and I'm like, we should have just turned the cameras on and we should just talked about so much.
Yeah, I'm much better impromptu for sure.
Yeah, you were mentioning earlier that you're not really a morning person, because neither am I.
Well, I am a morning person as far as after I can sleep in.
Yeah. Yeah.
Then I'm pretty
If
good.
the morning starts at 10 a.m.
So it's all subjective. It is
Yeah.
subjective.
Yeah.
But anyway, so we were talking about business a little bit, and it's interesting because I do have. You were asking, I think at some point when we had talked about how I got into business and stuff. And I don't know if I told you about the glass repair.
You were telling me, but
Yeah,
I think that story
I did
warrants
tell
some
you that.
repeating
Yeah,
on the podcast. Yeah. So
Well,
how old were you?
I think I was, I only had my driver's permit. And so back in the 1800s, I think that was about 14 and a half. Yeah. So, what happened was, and there's a moral to this story, so it's kind of why I think it's a good story.
I think so.
About business. You know, we were talking about business and being an entrepreneur and stuff. And so basically, long story short, I always knew I was going to be an entrepreneur. As a child, you don't know, you're not calling it that. You're just calling it self-employed or be my own boss.
Yeah.
That kind of thing, which is very important to note, that you're never your own boss. Your customers or your clients are always your boss, and that's really important. And I'm hardcore about that. But, when you're a child, you don't realize that.
Right.
So anyway, getting to the point, my first gig, my first real official gig that I monetized, or at least made some kind of revenue, or what I felt was like something legitimate, besides the other side gigs that were not. No, I'm kidding. I'm totally joking. But so I ended up, and now I understand this is before the advent of the internet and cell phones, and this is really back where before wheels were round. Okay.
70s.
And I like to refer to it as 1800s, but
right.
Then anyway, people know I'm exaggerating a tiny amount. But so I was laying on the couch one day, I'm sure my mother's, and watching TV, and there was a commercial, and this guy was he was repairing a windshield crack, and it has the voiceover going on, and I just thought, well, I'm watching that thinking, I can do that. I could repair a window like that. And
was it like an infomercial about it, or what was it?
It was just a regular standard commercial that you could get, whatever company was advertising. And so I just remember laying there on the couch watching that commercial, and for some reason in my teens, it really grabbed me. And I do remember it was when I had my driver's permit, because technically I was driving when I should have had an adult in the car.
Yeah.
So I did a lot of illegal things, and immoral things. That was like the most dangerous thing I've ever done, okay? But anyway, so, I ended up purchasing this, I had to go through the phone book and send a check, handwritten check, and I had one of my parents I opened up an account at a really young age. They obviously were the primary on it for just that time being until I turned 18, or I think back then it was 17.
Okay.
Or maybe even 16, you could have a checking account. So I end up sending a check and getting this repair kit through the mail. And it took weeks, and it felt like years.
Well, a lot of people don't know this, but back then when you mailed for something, you had to send in the money, your check or your money order, and then you had to wait 6 to 8 weeks before something ever arrived.
Yeah. It literally felt like forever, and it was I think weeks to months that I kind of started thinking I got ripped off on my first gig. And I thought, wow, and it was a lot of money back then. It was like $2,500 or something.
Oh, man.
Mm-hmm. And so anyway, I ended up getting the kit, and I was just elated. I was like, wow, this is awesome. And it's like so cool, I don't know what to do with it. And that's literally what happened. It was like, oh my gosh. And so I started working on the kit with all these little resin bottles. They were 1 to 3 ounce bottles that cost like $300 and some to on up for just one bottle. Yeah. And so it started dawning on me that very quickly that I had never repaired a stone chip, and I don't have a stone chip to repair
on any glass at all.
So I'm like, oh my gosh, what am I going to do? I don't want to break my own car window, and I'm not going to go and, break someone else's car window. So I went around to the salvage yards, and I secretly snuck in the back with my kit, and they looked at my kit. And it was just like, black plastic, basically suitcase. And they're like, what's in that? And I said, it's my tools. So I was right. Telling the truth, and they said, oh, okay, good. So I'd go way back in the corner, and this went on in the dead of winter for weeks. What I thought was going to be days turned into weeks, where I couldn't even break a windshield. Because as we know, windshields are tempered.
Yeah.
And so maybe at least most of us know, but so when you try to break a windshield, it's a lot more difficult than what you think to just get a chip out of it. So I had to go through that entire process. And then I got to the point where I finally was able to get a stone to hit it and make a perfect bullseye stone chip. And that's what I needed to be able to practice this windshield repair business that I was.
So you were also practicing slingshotting
I
perfectly.
was, yeah. I had a slingshot, and I ended up being able to nail it perfectly. So if you need a stone chip in your windshield, let me know. That's the end of the story.
That's the moral.
I am really good at that now. But so it's incredible as we go through a process of complete ignorance, and that word has such a bad connotation. But I use it a lot, especially on myself, because that's what it is. It's what you don't know. You just don't know what you don't know. And that can be incredible ignorance when you're not only young, not just in age, but young with doing anything. And so that's really important to keep in mind, that no matter how much you think you might know or don't know, there's an incredible amount of ignorance that goes along with building a business or starting anything. And so after I successfully had gotten this stone chip and breakage exactly where I wanted it, I started practicing and repairing with the kit. And I was just bleeding through resin like crazy. It was leaking out or squirt. And I'm like, I don't think that's really supposed to happen. And wow, how did I do that? And I went through all these different components and little rubber pieces and gaskets and different things that I'm like seeing negative outcome happening fast. And I was getting nervous. I was like, oh my gosh, I just blew through like 70% of my resin. We're talking thousands or hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of dollars. And, just about the time that we feel like we're going to give up, or we start really allowing fear to come in, is we either do one of the two things, it's fight or flight,
Yep.
So it's like, okay, this is survival. Not for 1 second did I think I was going to bail, but I did wonder, I started thinking of ulterior options to, okay, what do I do if this doesn't work?
Right.
If I don't get to where I need to get to. And so I ended up, fortunately, getting really successful but this is, gosh, winter turned into spring.
Wow.
Yeah. I mean, there was still snow on the ground, but it was, back then it was probably 6 inches less. And so, yeah, my first gig, I go down a street where there's a bunch of little small used car lots, individual private owners. And I end up walking to the one place, and there's two men, which at the time were considerably older, but I thought they were just old, really old. And
Yeah.
they probably are my age now, but
they're probably in their 40s.
Oh, thank you for that. No. So anyway, I ended up getting their business, but here's what happened. Obviously they looked at me at, by then I'm 4'11" or something. I'm a very petite person, and be nice now, no short jokes.
Yeah.
But anyway, so then I have a stone ship that I see that I want to fix, and it's perfect. I'm like, oh, I got this. It's good to go. So I said, hey, I can fix the stone ship out there, and he's like, and smoking, and I can tell he's really negative and opinionated, I guess is the better word, and that's all right. It didn't faze me. And there was the other gentleman too, and they're both smoking away, and they're just like, yeah, okay, honey, go ahead, little girl. And so I did, and we agreed on $75 cash. And I thought, cash, I like stuck it to him when I said cash, 14. I was like, yeah, I'm doing, I'm calling the shots here. But anyway, so I went out and fixed it, and it was great, and it was perfect. It was a beautiful sunny day, and the UV cured the resin, and I mean, it was flawless. I went back in and I said, okay, sir, you owe me $75. And he says, all right. And he comes out there and he looks and he can't see it. And the both of them start kind of coming down on me a little bit and starts escalating a little bit. And he's like, you know what? You didn't do anything, honey. Mm-hmm. And I said, yeah, I did. I said, you owe me $75, sir. And he says, yeah, whatever. And they start walking back in, sarcastically mumbling under their breath. Yeah, sure, she didn't, blah, 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 and some explicatives and whatnot. And I said, well, wait a minute. I said, come back here, please. I said, I can prove it to you. And so they stopped in their tracks and they turned around and came back. And I ended up showing them, if you do a really good windshield chip repair, you really can't see it. But as we know, with any kind of glass, and if there's a crack there or any shift in the glass, it's going to change the light that's going through it. And in the instance of repairing stone chips, here's a nice little clue to if the job was done, it actually projects a shadow. And so I had the gentleman put his hand over and hover over the dash, and he didn't quite understand what I was doing at first. And then he sees the dot on the back of his hand. And of course, as soon as he moves it away, the shadow disappeared. And then after a couple times, he realizes, oh my gosh, there's a shadow. And then he looks up at the glass and he can't see anything. And I said, that's the stone chip I repaired for you, sir. You owe me $75, please. And they both just dropped their cigarettes and went back in the building and said, come on here, little girl. And in their defense, I was little. But I went back in and he paid me $150 cash.
Really?
And he said, I'd like you to come back tomorrow and do the rest of the lot and find any other stone chips and come back once a week after that and look for any stone chips, and I'll pay you $150 for every one of them.
Wow.
And so that was my first official gig. But the real moral of the story is not really the funniness of it. You know, I left out a lot of really hilarious details.
Yeah.
But the real moral of the story is, you know, we don't have to know what we're doing. Okay? Too many times I've seen in business, and I've been a business advisor for Fortune 500 companies, even Fortune 100 companies, and I don't even know totally what that means because it's so big.
Yeah.
It's just not even comprehensible. But you don't always have to know, and I've seen this, where we always feel like we got to know everything we're getting into.
Yeah.
And, I mean, obviously we don't want to be frivolous about it. You have a reputation, and it's important to have self-integrity and understand the impact you're making on other people and on other lives. So that's always first and foremost. But if you're not hurting anyone else and you're not setting them back and you're fumbling and bumbling like an idiot trying to learn something in business, go for it. Go for it. Because that is what's going to make you smarter and stronger and less ignorant.
Well, how else do you learn, right? They don't teach a lot of that stuff even in college, even if you go to business school. They don't teach all those things. You need to learn them by screwing up.
Yes.
Right?
100%. Being in the trenches.
Mm-hmm. And that is a good point, because you don't need to know everything. You might just need to know just this much more, just a little bit more than the other person, right? Yeah. Especially if you're going to like give them advice and all that kind of stuff, right? Like if you're teaching something, or if you're trying to show somebody or something or a way to do something, you just have to know a different way or just a little bit more. You don't have to know everything, right?
Right.
Yeah, it's and I think that hinders a lot of people from doing anything at all.
Yeah, no, it definitely does.
It's a fear, right? They're like, no, I need to know every single detail, every single thing. I need to know exactly how this is going to play out. And that is the thing about being an entrepreneur, is you don't know how any of it's going to play out.
Yeah. And of course, obviously, they talk about fear being certainly the biggest obstacle. But I heard something pretty profound, and forgive me because I'm going to slaughter how they said it. I'm just paraphrasing. And it was fairly recently, actually. I think it was off the internet, but regardless of where, about fear. And this person said, well, fear is not, it's not that we're afraid of fear. It's that we're afraid of the success. And I thought, well, are we really, I think when I was younger, was I really afraid of the success? I think for some people that it does apply. It didn't for me, but it did take me back, and I paused and I thought, that's a really valid point. Perspective is everything, and experiences change who or make us who we are. For me, I was kind of fearless, and I think a lot of that was ignorance. It wasn't grandiosity or any kind of arrogance. It was just pure ignorance. I didn't have it in my brain to fail. I didn't, and I really have never had that mindset. And some people are just, I believe, born that way. Their DNA is made up that way, but not everybody's. And so I have met people along the way where that statement, I thought, that's profound to me.
Yeah, I think it applied to me a lot growing up. I think I hindered my own path by, and maybe it wasn't the fear of success. Maybe it wasn't like a self-sabotage situation. Maybe it was that I just wasn't fulfilled in being the best in that field or something. Because everywhere I worked, I became like a supervisor or a manager or whatever. But part of it was like, okay, but do I really want to just be here running this call center the rest of my life? Or do I really want, all these ideas would pop into my head, and then I just kind of self-sabotage from there. So my dad used to make the joke about me that He's like, in the past, this was a long time ago, but he's like, in the past 23 years, I've had 3 jobs. In the past 3 years, you've had 23 jobs.
Yeah.
Because I just wouldn't stay in something, I just wouldn't stick it out, because even though I excelled in there, and maybe it was that, maybe it was just I didn't want to say, or maybe that kind of success. I don't know.
Yeah, I don't know. I mean, did you feel that was at the time? Did you feel like you were afraid of failing? That was the ultimate inhibitor of your taking something to the next level? I mean, for me, I only ask that genuinely because I think for myself, I've witnessed through multiple, all different types of companies, everything from entrepreneurs up to the Fortune 500 companies, mostly larger companies. And the thing that I've seen a lot is it's actually boredom and or monotony that just doesn't stimulate that person anymore. They get tired of it. And
yeah,
I don't know. I mean, but
I think a lot of that was
I think that's a sign of some genius. I mean, you're welcome.
Then I'll pick that. Then that's what it was.
No, I'm not paid for this episode.
There's another client here that had someone else on the podcast, and I was just listening to it last night, and his guest was saying a lot of times people aren't fulfilled because their talents aren't matching their career, right? And so then they do have that. Right.
Yeah.
So they have certain talents that are they're not being fulfilled. Like that whole other part of them where they have these talents that aren't being used isn't being fulfilled. So then they wind up.
Yeah. I actually did mean what I said to some degree, even applied to you. Yes, Wally, even. But I have seen that where it depends on the person's makeup. This, of course, this is a tangent, but it ties in to some degree. I see too many times in business where we're labeled. Someone's labeled, an employee is labeled, someone working for you is labeled, and every person is different. Every person, fundamentally, we're the same, of course, but when you start getting into nuances of how the mind works, and then how you act or react to something, that's incredibly unique to every person. How I'm going to perceive something and receive something could be completely different than you or someone else, and vice versa. So, back to the whole thing of whether it's the person is not being stimulated enough cerebrally to be pushed and encouraged is certainly something I've seen more than once.
Yeah.
But I do believe that it tends to be people who are on a higher spectrum, and maybe it's only a higher spectrum in the sense of activity, but regardless, some kind of higher spectrum, or maybe if we don't want to label it as a higher spectrum, a different spectrum for sure. And so now I'm changing your compliment to a different...
I'm not better, just different.
I just realized I just really nicely took 60 seconds to explain to you that you're different.
You're not a genius. You're just a little off.
Oh, that's great. Oh, shoot. You noticed what I was trying to... No, I'm kidding. But, in all seriousness, it is. We are different. And good or bad, I think in the sense of being sporadic, it can be to a fault. If we easily lose focus on things, it can be, we'll use the word detrimental to some degree because, of course, the forward progress isn't always there. But I argue on the flip side that I've seen people who are very sporadic and they do struggle with making forward progress. And to me, as long as you're still learning, now, if you have a set goal in mind and you're sporadic and you repeatedly fail to meet those goals, then that's something you have to step back and ask yourself, how do I better manage my time and tangibly adjust these things that I'm doing or not doing too much of. But as far as if there isn't some specific goal and you just want to, let's say, for example, with music, I just heard someone a couple of days ago say, I just like too many, excuse me, to preface, they're a musician. I just like too many different styles of music. And they were really Debbie Downing on themselves. And I said, well, what is wrong with that? Are you trying to get into a specific venue that, only does blues music or something? And they said, no, I just have never tackled it because I just am all over. And I said, that's okay. That's a good thing. There's nothing wrong with that. Tackle all different parts of it, and you might find that you're going to narrow down what you're all over about, But anyway, so the long and short of the business end of things is don't worry about being sporadic in a structured way, in the sense that if you have a goal and you're accomplishing those, then great. Be all over the place. You only learn that way. You really do.
Well, and it's more about being self-aware, right? If you happen to know that you're this way, then a few things, right? Figure out how to organize that. Like figure out how, like if you notice, my whole studio is kind of in a sporadic situation, right? So it works with my brain. I can be over here, I can be over there, and I start doing different things, but I'm accomplishing the goals, right? Because I've kind of learned myself. But the other way to do it would be to, get other people around you that are different than you that complement you, right? Like if you can't be the person that is, they're all in the Excel sheet and they're good at the finances thing, then you better find someone else that is good to help you with that, because you're not going to be that, right?
Yeah, always surrounding yourself with your, what I call my weaknesses. I've never, at one point I had 100 people underneath me in my my company, and I never ever sought out people that were like me. God forbid if there was someone else like me out there, but no, really, the people that complement your weaknesses are what you have to surround yourself with, and that's hard for some people.
Yeah, I guess going back to, you said you worked with Fortune 500 companies, things like that. So how did you get from your early days of doing Windows to, and then how many businesses did you have after that? Like, what did you do?
Oh, that's a fair question. Yeah, how do you jump from not even knowing anything about windshield repair to Fortune 500? Basically, what I did is, after I sold that business before I was old enough to drink, I then opened up a consulting business called Briggs Consulting.
Okay.
And that's exactly what I did. I did business advising. The big break I got with that was a company, I don't know if I'm supposed to say the name or not, so maybe I won't, but it was a plastics manufacturing company, and I happened to have a mutual friend of the owner, who said, look, this is just chaos inside the doors here, and we have constant loss of everything, just loss everywhere. Everything from theft to not keeping employees to you name it. So I went in there and sat with the owner of the company. It was about a $40 million company, so not real big, but definitely had a decent budget, and they had 3 full shifts, and so I spoke with the owner of the company, and honestly, I just like glass repair, I really didn't. I knew and understood business, I felt pretty well, but not in the scope of. I understood business in the sense of relationships. I didn't know business past that. I really didn't. I mean, I knew some basic bookkeeping from the glass repair business and what have you, but to really understand business in its scope that's not something for someone under the age of 21 to really understand, unless they've been running their own with a bunch of employees and et cetera, for a long time. But when I was just a single person operating my business, I never had employees underneath me or anything like that. But the relationships I built along the way in that glass repair really went tremendously far. In fact, honestly, it's the best college out there. It really is. So to your point, to the point and to your question, so I went into this plastics manufacturing firm. I convinced the owner after an initial conference meet in his office, and then we went and had dinner one time and spoke for about 90 minutes. And the questions in that second meeting, which was really an interview, I was able to convince him that I can solve the problems. And the thing I stress the most, and this is where I wonder how many of you catch the word I just said, solve. The thing I learned the most and sold on the most, because I believe in it, is that you don't really solve. If you are going out to solve things, you probably aren't going to be as successful as you could or should be. Okay. I always go in with solution, and everything will solve itself after that. But the approach that I gave him and told him was that I don't have, because he says, how are you going to solve our problems? And how are you going to fix everything? And I said, well, I'm not going to solve anything. And he looked at me and I remember he was eating his salad and And I said, I'm going to be able to assess, and I will come up with solid solutions. And then therefore, let's hope things are solved. That you are expecting resolution or cure or fixing on. But what I see you hiring me as, and I want to be clear, is I'm going to be coming up with the solutions, and then I'm going to come up with programs to execute those solutions. And I would like to think everything falls into place after that. But my guarantee isn't to come in and fix everything. And boy, I'll tell you what, I think for a moment I thought I lost the gig.
Yeah.
I really did.
So do you think your honesty helped that?
Oh, absolutely. I would say I've always been a fact-based salesperson, but that is because of the basis of exactly what you just said, self-integrity and honesty. I don't like fluff, and everybody talks about different selling styles and what have you, but no matter who the person is, what their age is, what their background, I've always found when I'm just fact-based and I'm just as honest as they can get, that sells itself, because people want that transparency. They want raw transparency. They understand you're human and maybe you'll mess up a little bit, or maybe you'll misstep somewhere, but that your intentions are coming from a true place, and they know that is going to go further than fluff.
Well, and then you set proper expectations, right? Because too many people try to oversell themselves to get the gig, to get the job. And then, of course, then it winds up being that they can't, right? So,
yeah.
or something happens, like you didn't solve this, but the fact that just the fact that you got that meeting is super impressive, because you're not even 21 yet. Was it because you started and then sold a business that you could then have the confidence to even approach that? Like most people, like to this day, I'm like 49. I don't know that I would go into somewhere, I'm going to consult with you and I'm going to tell you, like what is that confidence?
And especially in a man in his middle age, and for me, that was a quote older man, that was old enough to be my father. And again, though, it's back to that ignorance level. Not arrogance, but ignorance. I didn't ever look at. I never saw failure, and I certainly was very cognizant that this is a person who is very successful, taking his time out for me. So it had nothing to do with overt confidence either, really, because inside I was like, wow, why is he meeting with me? Who am I? But staying on focus to what I believed, and that was I genuinely believed I could come up with the solutions. I knew I could. And so, interestingly enough, he ends up hiring me. And my very first meeting, this was so intimidating. You want to talk about ignorance. So it's a conference room, very large table. I don't remember, it's been so many years ago, but at least a dozen men, all men in there. And I'm just this young kid and petite, 5'1" female. And
so you've grown from 4'8" by
and
this time.
Oh, nice. Okay, only because you're in control of this, I will. I'm just kidding. I'll be so gracious.
Yeah.
That's good. But I do owe you one.
Yeah.
So,
Gotta get me back.
Yeah, right. Paybacks. Just remember, I don't keep track at all. But so this conference room of, I don't know, at least a dozen men in there. The table was filled probably 16 inches, a foot and a half high. It was something ridiculous of file folders, all in front of every single man in this room. And I didn't know who these men were. And I'm not sure to this day. I wondered for many years if it was an intimidation tactic by the owner, and it worked, I'll tell you. But again, I never had thoughts of failure, so I just adapt and overcome as it came to me. But anyway, to the point that they, this meeting starts with what ends up being department heads, okay, and a couple shift leaders, I think, or something. Okay, but most of them were department heads, and they all shoved their folders toward me, and very carefully, because some of them piled so high they would have just dumped over. And they said, "Okay, so you're here to fix this." And I thought, whoa, that was an awakener. I was like, oh my gosh, what did I get myself into? But it was the same thing. When you're in a situation you're not, you don't even have a clue about, really. What you have to do is number one that I've always done is self-discipline. I think the biggest thing of where I've seen, quote, failure, and I don't like using that word too much, not because it has a negative connotation. It rightfully has a negative connotation, as it should. Success is important, but failure is very important. But the number one thing that I do internally is I check myself. Someone's reaction might be 99.999% of the time, I see reaction as being emotion-based. And as soon as you do an emotion-based reaction in business, you're kind of hosed, You're not going to go nearly as far as you could or should.
Right.
And honestly, even in relationships, that's just around with it, this little pointer goes a long way. Absolutely, unequivocally, number one thing that I've always been very good at is to, like with your jab you just did, noticed how I was very controlled.
Yeah. Yeah.
See?
Well, to be fair, you took away my genius right before that, so maybe I owed you one. So.
Oh, nice. All right. I see where this is going. Yeah. All right. Who's quicker than who?
I know. Yeah.
No, you're definitely quicker than I am, for sure. But it's self-discipline. Being able to not knee-jerk react to something is probably what's gotten me the furthest. Okay. If there's any takeaway to anything, everybody can be smart, or they can be quick-witted, or they can be whatever. But for me, it's always gone back to just flat out, when something is hitting you right in the chest, you need to take that 60 seconds and assess. Now, obviously, you need to be able to assess quickly. The faster you are doing that, that makes you a little bit more successful. But it's like anything else. If you exercise it and practice it, you'll probably get better over time, I'm sure. But So yeah, with that table full of men and those folders, and okay, you're here to fix this. And I'm sure initially I was like, oh my gosh.
Yeah.
But I said, yeah, I am here to fix it. And I said, but with solutions. I said, the fixing comes at your end. And they all sat back like, wow, this gal's got cojones,
Yeah.
Or is it kahuna? I don't know. Anyway, it's a slang word.
Yes.
So sorry.
Yeah.
Am I allowed to say that?
Sure.
But, so we ended up turning into a big discussion. And what the issues were, obviously. I took many notes, what have you. The important thing is by the end of the meeting, they actually, for the first time, and I had several of them come up to me afterward and say this, they said, for the first time, we felt like we've been listened to.
Wow.
So owners, including myself in past, we get so engrossed in the daily grind and the big vision that we forget who's really doing everything for us.
Yeah, who's really running the
it's really important to understand and constantly remind ourselves of that. So I remember going home that night and thinking, gosh, wow, this man who's such an amazing, successful business owner, he's got his own management going, man, we've never been heard, or we feel like we've never been. And come to find out, a lot of times, communication, we hear about that all the time, is the thing that is the breaking point and the disconnect, obviously. And so really all I did was learn to communicate with each one of those individuals. And I remember my first successful number that I achieved was increasing their employee retention over 96%.
Wow.
In the first year. Okay, so for 15 or 20 years, they had a horrific, terrible employee retention record. And they said, now it's gotten to a point we can't even get people because we've saturated the market. Gosh. It's just, a revolving door. So I listened to these management people in what they felt were the problems. And I thought, I'm on to something. When I would go home at night, just like the glass repair, I didn't have a clue really what I was doing as far as the actual steps to the next step.
Yeah.
And I remember thinking, what? I just got to go listen to the employees now. So I did. I went, and my model for consulting started with that client. So what I would do is I would go on every shift, and I would go down the line on every job, and I would do that job. And I would do that job. I would have that employee teach me that job, and then I would do that job. And boy, that was fun, because some of them I was really bad at, and some of them I was really good at. And it made me appreciate what they're really going through. But importantly, it was twofold, because they see me investing in them. They don't just see me telling them what to do or axing them because someone higher up said that they're useless. It actually was me going there and working with them that they saw, wow, this chick cares. And yes, that was part of it. But the other part was that I'm learning what the flaws are. What is the process? What is the solution? How do I change this so I can design this solution, and then after that, design the systems that implement that solution, and then after that, execute it, and then after that, see if the owner likes the results.
Yeah. Well, it and at the same time, you were changing the culture of the place, because it used to be nobody cares what we're doing. Us way down here, us lowly people, and they're seeing someone that is trying to make a change, and then they see you by example also doing it and learning it and understanding them. And then it was a culture of, it seems to me like it was a culture of, oh, they care.
Yes.
Like even if the owner was having these issues, he cared enough to bring you in to do that.
Yes.
Right?
Yeah. Yep, absolutely. And the culture did change. And that is when I learned that word. You know, to me, a job place was just a place with four walls or whatever. And you go in and punch out. And people bark and complain. And nobody really listens. And you get your check and you leave.
Right.
And that was the first gig where I really learned that each and every venue or business or relationship or whatever has a culture. And the sooner you understand that culture, the quicker you can come up with solutions. And then everything else fixes itself. So that is exactly what I did. I went on all 3 shifts, and I went to every single job. And in a period of 6 months, and I mean, I was working nonstop. There were times I would, on third shift, and then I'd be back they call it on the carpet, off the carpets out in the manufacturing plant, and on the carpets in the offices. And I'd be back on the carpet in these meetings and what have you, but I was giving real raw feedback, and it just shifted the culture immensely. And toward the end, the owner said, I want to hire you on, and designed an entire position for me. And then I made the biggest mistake and took the position.
Right. Yeah. At first you were a consultant, but now you're like on the clock.
I really did. Yeah. I did not. Well, it's interesting because when you're a consultant, or in my case, I was a business advisor, you are treated differently than you are an actual, quote, permanent family member.
Yeah.
And I didn't know that perspective either. That was the first time I had learned that perspective as well. I was so flattered and so excited and felt like I really earned this position that he literally created and said, you write your own check. I want you to come to, this is a real story, and I can't believe it to this day. He says, you tell me how much you feel you need to be paid. You tell me what you feel you need to get in benefits. You tell me what your position is and give me a job description. I want to hire you. And boy, I did that. I took probably, I don't know, it seemed like a long time.
Was there anything in you that said maybe I shouldn't ask for too much when you were doing that?
Oh, you're constantly doing that.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah.
Like here's a blank check, but I better care a little more, not do the the biggest amount, right?
Yeah, no, you have to refrain and self-discipline. Yeah, of course I did that. Even with the benefits, I didn't go hog wild overboard. He's like, give yourself a company car. I didn't. Did I have the medical and dental and all that good stuff? Yeah, but I didn't give myself a company car. I gave myself what I felt I did deserve for the position, and then what was fair for the position. Other than that, he would have been fine giving me a company car. I know he would have. I do regret doing that one, and I learned a lot because you are not a family member when you're an advisor. Right. It's kind of like your roof guy coming in and doing your roof, and he's a contractor, and you like him and you get along great. And during the 3-4 weeks they've been on your house to do your big giant roof on your house, they did a stellar job, and the relationship was positive and perfect. Let's just pretend it was flawless all the way through. The price was right and everything. But when that man sits at your table eating dinner and now, is watching soap operas with you and petting the dog and feeding the cat and leaving his boxer shorts on the couch and all this other good stuff, it changes.
Yeah.
It's not the same. And I learned that. As ignorant as I was, I didn't even think of that perspective at all. I thought, wow, they called me a water walker. That was the first time I had heard that term, and I thought, water walker, wow, that's strong, that's bold.
What does that mean? Being
able to walk on water.
Oh, okay. And
and so they were like, there's the water walker. I'm like, geez, that's uncomfortable. And Yeah, I did. I regretted doing it because, when you're a family member, after a while, the honeymoon wears off. And so you are treated differently. And it's not that I hated it, but when you're a really driven person, it's hard to stay driven in a box.
Right. Going back to what we were talking about before, right? Probably what should have happened is, hey, I appreciate that, but what I would really love is for you to refer me to the next business.
Mm. Yeah.
Right? And then you could have done it again and done what you were good at and where your talents lied.
Yeah. So I ended up learning a year later. I absolutely hated what I don't get me wrong, I loved the people and they loved me and it was a really good, positive environment, but I was stifled. It wasn't me. And especially in my growth period that I was at, I was really young and I was on fire. I'm ready, bring it. Let's go. What's the next project?
Yeah.
What's the next thing I can find solutions for? And who can I help? That's the big thing I loved so much about it is helping people. I was like, oh my gosh, this is just amazing feeling. That's an intangible feeling. And you can't put any words to it. You really can't. So that's something that I really enjoyed a lot. But and that went away too. I didn't have the control to be able to help people as much as I could when I have my own business.
Right.
So that was a big lesson, and honestly, that was the bigger lesson than actually doing the contract itself.
Wow.
And so after that, you're right. I put in my notice. He offered me like 30% more.
Wow.
In income
To stay
in one day. To stay. And boy, I'll tell you what, I remember my ex and I were together, and he wasn't my ex at the time,
Right.
And so I remember going home and going, maybe I'm going to change my mind. He offered me 30% more than what? Oh my gosh, whoa, that's awesome. But I'm glad I did. I ended up pulling the trigger and getting out of there and continuing on with Briggs Consulting. And then I went, I did something really left field. And I thought, I'm not getting any younger. And as much as I love this, I won't have another opportunity for this. And I'm very patriotic. And I thought, I got to serve our country. I always saw commercials on TV for the Marine Corps, the few, the proud, the Marines.
And they're jumping out of airplanes and all that kind of stuff.
Air, land, and sea, the masters of all of them. And I thought, here I am in my mid-20s, and I really, in the back of my mind, I was very challenge-driven, obviously. But I was like, I'm not getting any younger, and I'm not going to, and I've officially hit the height requirement now. So
yeah.
I thought I'd bring that one out before you do.
Okay.
But anyway, so believe it or not, I've shrunk like almost 2 inches since I got out of the Marine Corps. But I was like 5'3", and now I'm 5'1", and without shoes, folks. But yeah, so I guess it might have helped. I was dating a recruiter, Marine Corps recruiter.
So he brainwashed you. He molded you into thinking it was the best thing to do.
Yeah, yeah.
Was this in the 80s? Are we in the 70s or 80s?
Oh gosh, you're killing me.
Well, I don't mean it for your age. I just wondered in what climate, social, like
well, let's put
like
it
the climate
this way.
of
it was Desert Storm.
Oh, okay, got it.
I went in just before Desert Storm.
So you had to go.
Oh yeah. And so there was no war or anything going on. It was peacetime, and I joined the Marine Corps, and absolutely, unequivocally, the best of times to the extreme. and the worst of times to the extreme.
Mm.
Yeah. Yeah. So, I don't regret it at all, but there's a lot of damage that the service does to the body and the mind. Yeah, I just had a really good friend of mine over south of Chicago area. Anyway, it doesn't matter where he's from, but he's 69 or 70. He's an older gentleman, and he has fairly young kids in his 20s.
Oh, wow.
In their 20s, triplets. But anyway, getting to the point, one of them was expressing some kind of interest in the military. And so he called me up, and he says, "Hey, Kim, you're the perfect person to ask him. And I think I'm going to," he said, "All right, if I give you my daughter's number and you can talk to her directly." And I said, "Yeah, sure, that's fine. But what's going on?" And he says, "Well, she's the one." And I said, "Which one is this one?" And she's the one in college, and she's the one that knows exactly what she wants to do and how she wants to do it, and yada yada. And I said to him, I said, "Well, then what's making her think about the military?" Yeah. And he says, "Well, just because of the career, the type of career it can give you, and blah 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 blah." And I listened to him for about 5 minutes, and it was mostly about the tangibles, that it can be a regular check, a good future, sure, that kind of thing, give you structure.
The GI Bill, all that stuff.
Yeah, and I said, I guess maybe I won't say his name, but anyway, so I said, "I'm gonna tell you right now, I don't encourage you for her to do that." And there was silence, and he goes, "Really? Why?" And I said, "I believe the service is for really two types of people." And he said, "Whoa, that's surprising coming from you."
Yeah.
And he says, "Well, so tell me, why do you say two types of people? And what is that?" And I said, "Well, let me preface first that as Americans, I believe we should all serve. We should be like any other country, and a lot of them do it, that you get fresh out of high school and you serve for at least 1 or 2 years.
Yeah.
And then you make your decision from there, what you're going to do with your life." So with that aside, the type of person that should be in the military should be only the type of person that is absolutely, unequivocally patriotic, and they want to serve this country. And they understand, maybe not to the depths and scopes that they're going to once they get in, but they have a basic concept and cognizant of the fact that they're serving their country. They're even if they never see combat, you're serving your country.
Right.
United States of America. I mean, that's a big task. That's a big ask.
Yeah.
You are signing your life.
Yeah, you're giving your life
away. And you need to understand that. And I said, so that's number one. And then the other person, the person that's fresh out of high school, or maybe they're still in high school and they're lost. They don't know what they're going to do in their lives. Absolutely, they should go in the service because it creates structure, and yes, it can give you a good future and what have you. But more so, for me, the military is about the intangible. It goes back to self-integrity. Why am I really going in? I said, your daughter can go in for all the great tangible reasons, but I said, I do believe in, I'm kind of an energy person and a karma person a little bit, that I believe that if you're not doing something, and especially that's signing your life away, and even if you're only doing 4 years, it's your life. You're living and breathing it. Then you should be all in. And I'm kind of a believer that can backfire a little bit, maybe if you're going in for the wrong intentions, and not in the sense of like karma, but in the sense of expectation. And expectations, when we have certain ones as human beings, and let's face it, in the service, they're not going to turn out the way you expected. Okay?
No way, yeah.
No. There's going to be things thrown at you in the military that you're going to be in for a serious wake-up call. So that destroys the psyche and or can really throw it off. And depending on what kind of person that is, you're doing more harm than good, honestly. And you're shifting. It's like a crack in ceramic. Once it's there, it's there. It never will go away. You could patch it, cover it up, do whatever, but it's there. That shift is permanent. And
it still has the shadow and the crack.
100%. There you go. And I like that one. I'm going to steal that one. All right.
Yeah, no, it's yours. It's literally from your story.
It's literally mine, but thanks. I'll patent that one.
Yeah,
okay?
there you go.
Yes, I'm going to protect that one so you don't use no. But yeah, you're right. It's 100%. It's always there. There's something always there. And so I said, your daughter, I feel is if she goes in, great. You're going to support her and love her and what have her, but. If she's clearly, to me, from what you're telling me, is what I said to him, she's going in with expectations.
Yeah.
And when you go into something that's so life engulfing, you should not have very specific expectations. You should go in it for inward and out, not outward and in. Otherwise, that can start really messing with your life, and that, if your neural pathways are going to go a certain direction, and then it does this, it can really, it shifts who you are as a person. So she won't know that at her age, but you, her, the father, need to really have a deep talk with her and feel out whether she is doing it for truly self-intentions, inward out,
right,
or if she's expecting these things coming in from doing this action. It often is when we have expectations, we get let down, and that can shift our psyche and our ability to stay motivated and on and on and on. And that turns into stress, and that turns into deterioration. And I'm saying can, it doesn't for every person, but I've seen it in nearly every person when expectations don't come through fully like we think they should. So I've learned not to expect, but then more to do from internally within. Am I doing this for genuine intentions? Am I doing this sincerely with great self-integrity? And if I am, then everything works out. It works out really well, and that's for me.
I've never served, but at one point I was going to go into the Army, and I'd taken the test, and I was ready to do it. Right. And had my son, and he was born, and I thought, maybe I shouldn't do this. And for this, one of the two reasons that you had, okay, so I'm not lost, and although patriotic, I wasn't so sure I would just jump into whatever Congress deems is a good war, right?
Right.
You know what I mean? I don't know that I'd do that, right? So at the time I was playing around with the idea, and then I decided not to, and a month later, 9/11 happens. And so I was definitely glad I didn't do it, because of course I would have been right away put in. But oftentimes I think about, and this is a weird shift, and I mean zero disrespect to anybody that's been in the military, and I'm not trying to, but I often look at everything you just said as the way people enter Christianity. Right? Like they come in with expectations. They come in with what can it do for me? They come in, and instead of looking at it like, you know what? I want to serve. I'm whatever you want to call it, patriotic to the Lord. I want to serve the Lord. I want to give. I want to do these things. And then and it really is that. They don't come in as one of those two. And it is the same thing, isn't it? It's like, so I'm going to patent all this, but it's the same thing as there's two kinds of people, right? It's like they want to serve God, or they're lost and they find him. And I've always thought about it that way. And that's why I think Christianity across the board in a lot of areas has hurt a lot of people and has done more harm than good, because you had a big old great commercial of all the tangibles. of what this could be instead of telling them what it really is.
Yeah.
You're really coming into this to serve the Lord, and it's not about you. It's about the outward part of it. And so then they all come in and they get hurt, and then people get upset, and somebody gossips, and dumb little things on a smaller level, obviously. But then you have a lot of not real Christianity, not real soldiers of the Lord, if that makes any sense.
No, that's 100% correct. In fact, that's very, yeah, I mean, that is an exact match. You are correct. And what we're saying and what I said is it ties to across the board with nearly every type of transactional relationship. And I'm careful when I say transactional, but especially Christianity. You're right. I mean, I have so many friends and acquaintances and observed that have such specific expectations because they're taking from outward and expecting, what is this giving me?
Right.
And I'm a big believer that, and as we're both confirming, that tends to fail more often than not. And back to this father's daughter, that exactly just like with Christianity, she's looking at she's got all these other things she's already doing that she's very passionate about. And so to me, in my mind, now I got to be careful because I only know what he told me. That's where I said you need to talk to your daughter more. But from what he told me, that is her extrapolating tangible things that I'm expecting if I do this transaction.
Yeah.
And unfortunately, I feel that's a setup for a big fail.
Oh, yeah.
A big fail.
And can you imagine if all the outward people, all they saw instead of the great commercials of it all, but just a bunch of selfish soldiers, what that would look like?
Yeah.
Right?
Well, they'd be rogue. They would all, they would all go rogue.
Which is what happens in Christianity. Right? So now everybody on the outside is looking at it like, oh, well, I don't want to do that because look at how selfish and stupid these people are at this church or that church or whatever, and fail to see at its core what it actually is when it comes to Christ, right? And when it comes to, well, anyway, when you were saying all that, I'm like, that's so crazy how much that matches up. Like,
honestly, you turned on a light bulb for me. I mean, I've always known that, but I guess I didn't literally translate that to, I mean, because it's identical. You are correct. That's 100% what I'm talking about. Where people do that with religion, people do that with the military.
Yeah.
And it really, technically, I believe, should only be two types of people, like you're saying.
Yeah.
With Christianity, either you're lost and you found God or a higher being, and whatever you believe in. But at least you're obviously with Christianity, it's God. But the fact that you are lost in life and then come across or discover, that's from within outward, that's not outward. And those who go to church or any kind of event or gathering around Christianity and then have these expectations that it's supposed to give me this and provide me that and produce this, and then that doesn't happen. Yeah, that's it. Yeah, that's interesting.
It's literally like a false conversion.
It is.
Didn't actually happen.
Wow. Yeah, that's interesting because I had not just literally put those two side by side, but that's exactly what it is, 100%.
Gosh. Well, and I had been thinking about it a little, and when you were explaining the whole thing, I was like, oh my gosh, that's exactly.
It is
so
exactly.
It is what I was thinking.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, so, it goes back to the military people, or in the second half of the equation here, or the discussion, excuse me, not equation, that those who are seeking Christianity in the sense of practicing it, they They need to do it from within, and everything has to go within outward. And
well, and as Christians, we need to be honest about what you're getting yourself into. Also, right? Like, don't paint it out like everything's going to be fine now. You know what I mean? It isn't, and this is what you're getting yourself into. There's a reason why one of the older songs is like, the army of the Lord, kind of soldiers. I mean, they had the idea back in the 1800s the same way. It's like, you need to know what you're getting yourself into. This is serious. And so if you don't really properly explain that to someone, how do they know what they're getting themselves into?
Mm-hmm.
How can they make a proper decision for God?
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
Yeah. It's just been like, but speaking of music now, I just want to talk a little bit about this because I haven't seen you perform, but I understand you have like a band and you're also like an audio engineer. How did all that come into play? Was that like some sort of hobby on the side of all this business stuff?
Well, I have actually been professionally performing. And when I say professionally, I want to be careful here because to me, professionally is like famous people. I equate professional to famous people, but that's a subjective. So I just want to clarify, meaning getting paid to play music, even if it's 5 cents, I count that as professional.
Yeah.
But anyway, yeah, I have actually been professionally gigging since I was 14.
Wow.
The same year as I was. Mm-hmm. Yeah, that sounds right, because I was actually a drummer. I'm a trained drummer. And I actually, of course, started, what is it? I don't know how old you are when you start music in school. And
maybe like middle school or something.
I think it was like 5th grade actually in our school.
Okay.
Mm-hmm. So probably about 4th grade-ish, then I had gotten drum lessons, and then I started playing in band, and then that whole duration from 5th grade until high school, through high school, I was taking private lessons on drums. So I'm not a classically trained drummer, I wouldn't say. I wasn't doing a lot of sheet reading, although I could. But I just call it, private drum lessons. So I was privately trained on drums from a pretty young age up until about 14. Because, everything shifted at 14. And then I was traveling the country on weekends. But you got to keep in mind this was maybe like a period of once a month, once every few weeks. And back then, as long as you had permission, and unfortunately my parents didn't care what I was doing.
It was different times.
It was different times. Yeah. As long as I was out and not at home, they loved that. So I actually traveled the country with a band, a professional band. They were more of a like a hotel cover band, corporate cover band. And I drummed for them and did backing vocals for them. Gosh, for like 3 years or something like that. And wow. Yeah. So I started out, and I was getting paid $800 to $1,200 a gig. So they were getting paid very well. And in hindsight, now I realize I should have been getting paid a lot more. But, $800, $1,200, and especially as a kid, but even nowadays, that's good pay.
Yeah. To drum, to do what you love to do.
Do right. Yeah. So it was always a strong passion. I did that. And then I've traveled East Coast, West Coast. When I was in the Marine Corps, I had a band overseas, a professional corporate cover band. I did a lot of original bands when I was younger. So I've just gigged professionally for a long, long time. Yeah. And then I'm actually classically trained flautist. So,
okay.
Yeah. Wow. I had to do flute, and
I was the clarinet.
Were ya? Mm-hmm. We should jam.
Yeah. Just do a woodwind jam.
We'll do a woodwind jam.
Yeah.
Yeah. Sometimes we'll have to block that out. Just break out your clarinet and I'll toot on the flute and we can think of a name later. But anyway, so I ended up just gigging all over the place. And then at preteens maybe, I started taking vocal lessons. And then by the time I was in my 20s, I was teaching vocal lessons for a long time, actually.
Yeah,
really long time.
I don't even know if anyone's catching the fact that you're doing all this while you're starting a business and selling a business and consulting with this company. It's pretty wild.
Yeah, and I was waitressing full time during that time. Yeah. All right, this is really going to date me. I was waitressing when Walgreens was a restaurant.
Oh, gosh.
And nobody remembers that. There are a few people I run across that are like, "Oh my gosh, you're older than dirt."
It's like a Woolworths was, right?
Yeah,
kind of.
Yeah, you know what? You remember Woolworths? Wow.
Well, there's still a Woolworths restaurant in Nashville. That's why. Yeah, there's still.
Is it right in Nashville?
Yeah. So they kept it like very old looking and very vintage kind of thing.
And very retro. Yeah.
Still a restaurant there.
Wow. Yeah. It was exactly. Yeah, I think it was probably the competition to, but they started out as a soda fountain.
Wow.
Drug company first, and then they had a real soda fountain in their drug selling company, and then went to a restaurant chain. And I think they had like 1,100 stores across the nation.
What?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I'm almost sure that number's pretty close. And then, so all through my high school from 6th, 7th, 8th, 7th grade, 7th, 8th, 9th, 10th, and into 11th grade. So nearly 4 years I waitressed. And back then, if you had a work permit from your parents, you could work at any age.
Yeah, I was going to say that's very different. Than today.
And my parents didn't care. So.
They're like, "You're not going to be home? Here you go."
In fact, maybe they're the ones that signed the service papers for me. No, I was out of the house by the time I was 17. Yeah. So, but I was trained on different instruments. I'm classically trained flautist, and that is actually classically trained. And then I am contemporarily trained on vocals. So I took contemporary lessons. And then I'm just privately trained on drums. So in my youth, I was kind of a voracious musician. And unfortunately, with business, a lot of that has gone away.
Really?
Which kind of saddens me. So part of my bucket list is to get back into the music after I get a couple things done this next couple years with my life first. And then, start focusing back on music and my instruments. But so I actually got into audio engineering only by stumbling upon it. And a lot of things in life, that's kind of what happens. But I ended up audio engineering at Soundfield Studios in Grand Rapids, Michigan. I don't even know if they're still open.
Wow.
Bill Hendrickson, who used to own it, passed away unexpectedly, kind of at a younger age. And so that is no more. I did hear someone else was running it, but I don't know if it's still there. But years ago, for several years, I was there, and that's when I learned a lot about sound and stuff. And then started doing my own audio engineering studio and recording a lot of bands. So it was a self-taught process at first, But then I started getting really passionate about it and started getting certifications and stuff. And so then that landed me a gig when Soundfield, to me, ended up closing out because Bill was no longer there. I just left. It was not the same. Several years later, a few years later, whatever, I ended up getting a gig at Brilliance Corporation, which is the audio on CDs and books, on digital, anything on digital. Used to be audio and cassettes back in that day.
Yeah.
But anyway, and so then I was working for them. And so, I don't know, I have formally maybe 10.5 years of actual audio engineering for, getting paid for it. But I've always been an audio engineer in my own studio. So for a long time, I was just a hack and kind of knew, but then I became more serious and got formally trained in it.
Wow.
Mm-hmm.
That's great. So what's coming soon then? Are you gonna start doing that again? Are you gonna start playing again?
I am gonna start my audio engineering. I have a little private music studio over here in Norton Shores. And
okay.
Yeah, but it's pretty much a storage room and a practice space right now. I have a couple details that I have to finish up with my house renovation, which is going to be another 16 more months easily.
Okay.
And then after a couple years with my house renovation, then I'm going to switch over to the studio and finish that up.
Oh, that's fun.
Yeah, when that gets done, I'm really excited. And then I'll start writing finishing my album, my original album.
So when you do your album, you're obviously singing, but what other instruments are you playing? The drums on these albums, or what are you playing?
Yeah, I'm going to be playing all the instruments. Yeah, I'm gonna write and compose, and then perform, and then produce them.
Yeah.
Yeah.
That's what I did, but I wasn't as good probably as.
Oh, I don't know about that. I want to hear. I don't think you had a CD or something, or.
I do, but I didn't. Yeah, I haven't given it to you, but I'll give it to you. It's like from 2012 or 2011, something like that, and it was.
I really want to hear
all
it.
in my house.
That's,
so you know, I was particularly interested in getting it done quicker than I was being meticulous at what it sounded like exactly, if that makes sense. Like being very meticulous at things. So I would do it completely different now, and I've got other songs that I eventually want to do anyway. So.
Yeah, I mainly, honestly, I just want to hear the songs. That would be cool. It's so funny because I think it was Pastor Jim or something. The first time he gave me his CD of original songs.
Oh, yeah.
He was prefacing, "Now, Kim, the audio engineering, I'm really not happy." And it's like, Jim, it's okay. I'm capable of listening to a song without hearing
Well, us artists, we're very harder on ourselves, right?
Well, and you know what? You can have spent the most amount of money on a studio, and there's always going to be something where you go, I don't like that, how that turned out.
Yeah.
So, I don't really, I judge, but not completely on the audio.
Well, and even the difference between the way things are done today, it seems like producers have a lot more. Well, maybe it was like that back in the day too, but producers have a lot of control of how the song turns out because their producing name is on it.
Yeah, you know what?
Right?
That's an interesting point you bring up because I didn't realize that until I really got into audio engineering. I always thought when I was just in my basement doing my own stuff that the artist was the one telling you everything. And in the professional world, that is not the case. No, it is their name on that audio. And so they control a lot to the point that sometimes, you say, well, I want the drums brought up or something, or, and depending on their level of expertise, that might not happen.
Yeah, no.
Just because they do know best. If they're really good, that's a good thing. When they're just a novice, that's no.
Well, the idea behind George Martin being the producer of the Beatles and what he was able to do with them when they would just come in with a guitar and a song, it's obvious that when there's a good producer behind you,
Yeah, and that is as musicians and artists. Musicians are naturally control freaks to some degree, at least in the arena of music, and that's a hard thing to give up. Where they have to realize that obviously it's a trust issue in who the person is. Though, if it truly is a hack, you don't want to listen to them. You need to be able to say, look, I see this or hear this all the time. There's a lot of amateur, quote, audio engineers out there, and they might be a guitar player. And it's so funny because every time I hear a recording, I'll know immediately who the engineer is, meaning as in what instrument they play. I'll know immediately.
Wow.
When the drums.
So you can match, like, okay, when this
100%.
guitar comes in, that must have been the producer, the audio engineer jumping
Yes,
on.
100%. And more professional ones understand not to do this, but you'll know. I've had a lot of people say, well, how do I know if I have a good engineer? And I said, well, number one, if the engineer, because a lot of times they'll say, because they're not really listening to me, but maybe I'm just putting my trust in them that they're really good.
Right.
And I said, well, then when you hear your scratch tracks or whatever it might be, or your stems and they're blended or whatever, but they're not mastered out yet, maybe you'll know right away because you will hear the guitar too loud. And if your audio engineer is a guitar player, your guitars are always going to be too loud, too prominent.
Yeah.
And if they're a drummer, you'll know immediately because your drums are too prominent. And it's a dead giveaway. It's always a dead giveaway.
Oh,
so, yeah, if they have everything blended nicely, and really seated inside that recording, and there's a lot involved in that statement. But anyway, if it's truly seated inside that recording, they're a good engineer. But if anything is just too prominent, then you pretty much know they're probably not pro level, and you know that they play that instrument.
Yeah. Okay, that makes sense. That makes sense.
Yeah.
Because that's probably the flaws I have on my CD. Right? So
well, you're a yeah, but you did your own recording, right?
Yeah,
but you're a multi-instrumentalist.
You know where I struggled is how loud my vocals were supposed to be or not.
Okay. Yeah.
But also because I don't really like to hear myself anyway too, and so there was like that thing where
do.
I'm putting all this
I
music
actually struggle with that too because I don't like and that has actually a lot though to do with not the volume. It has to do with, again, going back to the word where I call it seated in the mix. And that is a hard thing to get down, understanding how to seat the vocals inside the mix.
And another thing, I know we're going along, but the other part is when, some music will start off small or with less instruments and it starts to like build into this thing, how to get that right, because you want it to be softer here, then you want it to be bigger here, but then sometimes all the levels just, you put them all the same, and then that's
too much.
Yeah, it becomes too much here.
Yeah, and there's a lot of trickery with that as well, as far as when things build and how to blend the mix with effects. A lot of times that happens two ways. It's either effects, and me personally, I do it through layering. I think that's the best kept secret in audio recording, is tons of layering, and then bring your volume slightly underneath, and it sounds massive, but it doesn't have that volume peak to it. Does that make sense?
Yeah, I think so.
Yeah, and that's a really nice trick because it can just give this like really powerful build sound without doing what you're saying, where it starts becoming overly saturated and loud.
Well, I'm going to have to do my next album at your studio.
Yeah, well, if it's done. I don't even have my act together, no pun intended, literally.
Yeah.
Yeah. But yeah, I mean, or you still have your studio or
No, because I was literally doing it. I'd find a closet, stick the mic in there, do the vocals that way. I'd find a place in a corner, pat it around, and then play the guitar under the mic. I was like doing, I don't even live in the same place where I did it. So and then I used a lot of keys to add certain other things, and you'll be able to probably hear that. But I did all the instruments on that too, and everything.
Well, believe it or not, I actually have a patriotic song I'm going to be releasing this year.
Oh, really?
Yeah, it was just copywritten a year ago, and it's of course an original. But I'm releasing it probably Memorial Day. I was going to do July, 4th of July, but someone talked me into thinking about Memorial Day, and I thought, you know what, maybe I will. So anyway, that original song, gosh, why did I interrupt you and bring that up? Just to plug myself, I guess?
Yeah, I think so. No, go ahead. I want to hear more about it.
No, I'm kidding. But
where are you going to release it on?
Where?
Yeah, just
I haven't fully decided. And then here's the other kicker. Talk about having my act together. Not together. I actually am leaving on Monday for a month, 1 month or 6 weeks, somewhere around there, all around the country, drive around the country tour.
Really?
And yep.
Like with singing?
No,
Oh, just doing
vacation.
It your own? Okay.
Yeah, I'm sorry. Yeah. Now, if I was thinking that if there's an open mic or a place that has a gig, and
that'd be cool.
or if I find a venue I really like, I'll book a gig and come back later in the year or something. Sure. But no, it's a personal vacation trip. But the reason I brought that up is because I'll be gone for at least a month with that. That's April, and then Memorial Day, is not
it's right around
far around the corner from that. So I better get my act together if I'm going to do Memorial Day. But yeah, I have a patriotic song I'm going to be releasing this year. And
that's awesome.
Got to redo the vocals and lay that down. But the reason I had actually brought that up was because those vocals on my script, now granted, it's a scratch track, but for a scratch track, it's not that bad.
Okay.
I actually recorded the vocals right off of my iPhone.
Really?
Yes.
Oh.
And you wouldn't know it.
Wow.
You wouldn't know it. Now, a lot of that has to do with the post-production and I didn't do a lot of work to it because it's a scratch track.
Yeah.
And I need to re-record it and then master it out. But it's kind of funny because you talk about, hey, I just recorded wherever I could. But look at these bands that are famous bands, just using an SM58 in the studio or a 57, actually.
Yeah.
A lot of them are just using SM57s. And years ago, that was kind of like a cardinal sin if you use that for vocals.
Right.
And honestly, they're starting to learn that whatever records without a lot of noise floor, interference in the signal, do it.
Yeah, because there's a lot more tools in post nowadays, anyways.
Yeah, and there's a rawness to it too. But yeah, there's a lot of tools in post.
Well, and there's and that's a good wording to use, like the scratch tracks. That's probably what my album is 12 scratch tracks.
You think so?
That I wish I would go back and do it right.
But I think you might be being hard on yourself. But
yeah.
I mean, honestly, it probably sounds really decent for the tools you had and what you were doing.
And it was it was like, I think I recorded here and there a lot of those songs between like 08 and 10, a long time ago.
Yeah,
older Macs.
That's a hot minute ago. Yeah, absolutely. And so, I just really, I enjoy the mastering out part of it.
Yeah.
And that's very tedious. But the reward of mastering something out, is a totally different process from actual just mixing. But back to your, trying to always figure out the vocals and stuff. The getting it seated in the mix is the key.
Yeah.
Yeah, where it doesn't sound like it's too separate and out on top and just laying on top.
Yeah, that's what it feels like for me. Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
A lot of time.
Yeah, if you think of a recording in a tangible way, like sheets of paper or something, or building blocks, and if the vocals are just, a lot of times that happens where they're just on top and they just don't sound right. They don't sound like part of the music. But a lot of that is fixed during the mastering process. But if you're doing it during the recording, not during the recording, excuse me, but in the post-production, one of the things is to focus on is the effects. Oftentimes that means your effect application is imbalanced.
Okay.
So, you might have like really dry vocals, and then really reverby guitar, and that's going to create a separation. Your brain, even though you might mix it in the actual meter exactly right, the brain is still going something
different.
Something's not natural and right here. So I found a little secret to getting the path of least resistance on resolving that issue is often start looking where your effects are and what's going on. You know, if you have a similar effect on the vocal to your guitar, and I don't mean exactly like the same plate reverb and this, but a similar in the sense of audibly what your ear is capturing, that can start helping blend that in better with it not sounding like it's sitting on top. And then you don't have the volume struggle as much.
Yeah.
Because now it sounds like it's coming more from the same room. Does that
right? Yeah, that makes sense. Yeah, because then it sounds like it got recorded live, but not really, right? Like it sounds like everything happens, and that is an issue. Like I probably used a bunch of different locations and stuff like that, but probably gonna have to when you come back. I'm gonna have you back on so we can talk about your trip.
Oh my gosh!
Yeah, I want to know what you all did. What if there's a bunch of adventures in there that you need to talk about?
I mean, I hope they're good ones. Hopefully, it's not like planes, trains, and automobiles.
But that's a blast from the past. That movie is hilarious.
I know, it's one of my favorite movies. But yeah, absolutely, that would be fun. All the things I learned from it, and all the things I did or didn't do in it, or the strange people I met, or the fun people I met. Mm-hmm.
Hopefully, it doesn't turn out like Paul McCartney thought, well, we'll go on a road trip and we'll do a whole thing and it's going to be great. We'll have a bunch of adventures, and it just turned out to be the magical mystery tour with nothing going on. So hopefully you actually have adventures.
Right. Yeah. Yeah. I'm honestly, if it's pretty subdued and quiet, I'm fine, but I'm definitely going to go check out music. I'm going to check out real estate. I'm thinking about Mississippi. I don't know anybody there, but I'm going there to scope out the real estate and check out the it's like going back in time. When I looked online, 2,500 square foot beautiful home for $130,000.
Yeah,
it's literally like going back in time. So I'm gonna go there and actually I have some appointments set up to look at some houses for possibly flipping.
Oh wow.
Mm-hmm.
That's cool.
So, anyway, it's a whole mixture of stuff. I'm going to see a couple Marine buddies on the way.
That's cool.
Yeah. And I'm going to try to record a lot of my trip. So, yeah.
Oh, that'll be cool.
Yeah. And then I'm not going to live stream it, but I'll record
You're
it.
You're going to become a YouTuber on the way.
Oh, no. Definitely not. Now watch, I do.
Yeah, right. No. Guys, well, thank you so much for being here.
Absolutely.
We'll have to have you back and we'll talk more about that.
Yeah, it'd be fun.
Thank you.
Well, thank you. Thanks. It was a privilege. I appreciate it.
No, it was fun.